Ghana's parliament passed an anti-gay bill on Wednesday. The draft legislation would punish persons who partake in LGBTQ plus sexual acts, as well as those who promote the rights of gay, lesbian or other non-conventional gender identities with lengthy time in prison. A coalition of Christians, Muslim and Ghanaian traditional leaders sponsored the legislation. The bill, one of the harshest of its kind on the African continent, still has to be validated by President Nana Akufo-Addo. For more on this conversation, we're now joined by outright international researcher Ohotuowo Ogbeche. Ohotuowo, a pleasure to have you on the program this evening. Firstly, tell us a bit more about how might these harsh penalties outlined in Ghana's anti-LGBTI plus bill affect the ability of individuals and also groups to advocate for their rights and also access to essential services?
Thank you for having me this evening. Yeah, the bill seeks to apply itself to LGBTQ people and their allies. So this means that anybody who speaks up in support of LGBTIQ rights, anybody who has a family member that doesn't report them, is also like kind of contravening this law. The thing is that under the bill, there is a duty to report. It places a duty, a burden on family members, on guardians, on teachers and institutions to report LGBTQ people to state authorities. So what it does is to create a hostile environment, preventing LGBTQ people from enjoying their rights or living freely or from existing freely in the country. What we've seen is that it has led to already abuse of power by law enforcement agencies. There is arbitrary arrest, detention and torture, intimidation and harassment within detention. There's also a spike in human rights violations from the public or general public. What it means is that LGBTI rights advocates cannot exist freely. They cannot advocate. They have already been clamped down in their workshops. They have been arrested of LGBT activists, and there have been death threats against them. So it's generally a hostile environment for all members of the community and their allies.
So these laws, if implemented, sound quite draconian. What actions can the international community then take to address the concerns raised by the United Nations and other rights organizations regarding Ghana's anti-gay bill?
Yeah, at this point, it's really critical to listen to and amplify the voices of LGBTIQ Ghanaian activists. And they have put out a message for the community, international community, to carry out plans that work with their objectives. This includes writing to our leaders, our political leaders and diplomats that have the whole international sway, the whole sway within Ghana's community as well. Petitions to our government leaders, including demonstrations at Ghana's embassies abroad in collaboration with Ghanaians living abroad. And at this point in time, the bill would have impacts on foreign investors. So it's time to take a step back and review the documents with Ghana's government and include provisions that will protect LGBT individuals in the country. At the same time, it's time for humanitarian action because individuals are in crisis mode. There is lack of access to healthcare services, denied access to healthcare services, and it's time to provide humanitarian action relief in terms of healthcare, food, clothing, housing, and other forms of relief to the community. Well, when people have to flee the country, as some people will have to, because it's very hostile right now, other countries should also provide asylum and safe passage for LGBTQ Ghanaians.
Considering what you're telling us now, how might the criminalization of the LGBTI plus identity and relationships impact the mental health and well-being of individuals in Ghana? And what support mechanisms are vital in such hostile environments?
As it stands now, there has been extensive impacts on the mental health, the well-being, the physical health, in fact, of LGBTQ Ghanaians. There is a lot of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and suicidal attempts as well. And it's harder to live with that because hostels in Ghana do not create room for LGBTQ Ghanaians to walk in freely and access holistic health care. So it's important for international community as we provide aid, humanitarian aid, provide mental health care as well. And it's important that there's a lot of solidarity in messaging. At the same time, when we have like healthcare agencies that are funded by World Health Organization and other major UN UN bodies, it's important that they ensure that there is room, there is holistic healthcare in these spaces, in public institutions as well for LGBTQ Ghanaians, because the mental health impacts are very extensive.
Yeah.
As it stands. Yeah.
So I guess it also then begs the question as to how can advocacy efforts effectively navigate the cultural, the human rights, and international aspects involved in promoting LGBTQ plus rights in Ghana and similar contexts as well. Give us your observation in this regard.
Yeah. We must note that people that are promoting this bill are putting themselves out and promoting family values. But in reality, the bill does the reverse of that. The bill is seeking to legalize and institutionalize hatred. It goes against everything that is within Ghana's cultural, family, and communal values. It is asking you to turn against your brother and report him for being gay. It is asking you to turn against your student. It's asking you to expel students, deny them basic amenities because they are LGBTQ. And that is not what Africa's values are stand on. This is not what we need cultural values hinge on. So it's important for the community within and outside Ghana to really think about what it means to be African and what it means to hold family and communal values. And this is not what the bill itself stands for. So we can come together to reject such horrendous and provisions that really want us to hate our neighbor.
Otto, what strategies have proven effective in empowering LGBTQ plus communities to resist societal pressures and threats to their safety as well, and also their well-being, particularly environments where reporting LGBTQ plus individuals is also encouraged?
Yeah. One of the things to take note of is to prioritize safety of the individual and of organizations, because what happens is that at this point in time, in your advocacy, you're unsafe, you're a target from state and other individuals. So it's important that activists in this life, and this is what we do in other parts of Africa and other parts of the world where there's so much hatred and hostility, is to prioritize safety, to prioritize community, relying on your community, people in your community to carry out communal advocacy, and also to rely on allies who may be in the movable middle and may be able to go access places where you cannot access. So it's in Ghana, for instance, the Shiraj, which is the human rights institution, is a very vocal ally, a very vocal institution that is speaking for the community. So activists are relying on that channel as well and relying on middle bodies to speak up for them where they cannot access the spaces. So again, safety is really important, and activists must prioritize their safety and the safety of their communities.
I'm interested in that last point. In what ways can allies and supporters outside of Ghana best show their solidarity with the activists and also organizations who are facing increased risk and challenges under the new legislation?
Yeah. One thing is for people outside Ghana not to do what they think is right, but to really listen to the activists within Ghana. Because right now it's time to learn and amplify their voices and not what we think is right within our different contexts. So as you want to do advocacy, the Ghanaian activists have listed several approaches to that advocacy, petitioning your various governments, demonstrations outside of Ghana, seeking humanitarian relief and action in those spaces, and also providing safe passage to LGBTQ Ghanaians. So advocacy should be hinged on what is useful, what is beneficial to Ghanaian community on the ground, and not what has worked in different contexts. And it calls for collaboration, really. It calls for working hand in hand with LGBTQ activists within Ghana, prioritizing their community safety, prioritizing their well-being, and providing much needed emergency resources to the community at this time. These are some of the things that would work to carry the community through this crisis situation.
As we wrap up our conversation, and also considering concerns about Ghana's international reputation and human rights standing as well, what role can diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, and even global partnerships play in urging the government to reconsider or even amend the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation?
Yes. Ghana used to be seen as a beacon of human rights in West Africa and in Africa generally, and this bill goes against everything a democratic institution or nation should stand for. So it's time to use that stance that Ghana used to have, or Ghana should have, in the international community. And there are various channels. The African Center Commission on Human and People's Rights has carried out organizations that support LGBTQ people's rights. So it's time to rely on such outlets and put pressure on government, particularly the president, who is supposed to be a human rights lawyer, to not give assent to the bill and have some sort of pressure from diplomats of all countries to Ghanaian parliamentary leaders, because if you want to stand for human rights, you have to stand for human rights in your actions as well, and not promote such a negative and oppressive draconian law. So diplomatic pressure, sanctions in a sense that they must review agreements that and ensure that there's provisions that protect LGBTQ in those agreements, so that Ghanaian leaders will be bound by those agreements, regardless of what they may be seeking to promote in Parliament. This will give them a rethink, I think, and help us to get back to the place where this bill would never exist.
Thank you so much for your time. That's our guest, Ohotuowo Ogbeche, providing invaluable insights into the implications of this bill, also drawing from her expertise as a global researcher.